Welcome to day 3 of Media Center's 6th International Conference on COVID-19 in Asia, Communication, Nationalism, Technology. We had 2 fine days of discussions so far, very in-depth and covering a wide range of topics with a central theme of rights, democracy, and the challenges posed by COVID-19 era. Before we continue on to today's proceedings, let me just remind you about some usual standard guidelines for these Zoom events. Participants are muted upon entry. Videos should be turned off when you are not a part of the panel. Send your questions to the chat box or use the raise hand function. Updates from Asia Center team will be put in the chat box regularly through each panel as we proceed throughout the day. So let me just review the program for today very briefly, 10 September 2021. Following some time panels yesterday and the first day, we have continued with some very engaging topics. And you see there, we start at 8:45 with panel 12, legal instruments, fiscal policy, and accountability in response to COVID-19 pandemics, brought to you by the expertise agency of the Indonesian House of Representatives. We will continue with panel 13 on media freedoms and access to vaccine information, brought to you by the Internews service. We will work on lunch at 12 o'clock. I will look at you. Please reconvene around 12:55. We have a start with the panel 14 at which will go until 2:30. Now we will have a break in the afternoon at 2:30, which will allow us to how governments managed and manipulated political competition during the COVID-19 crisis. Very exciting panel. So please do join us for that panel this evening. I wish to remind you of our conference next year, our 7th international conference. We have issued a call for partnerships. You see that the theme, the title of the conference is Freedom of Expression in Asia, and the conference will be held. Hopefully we will be able to reconvene face-to-face by then, from 24 to 26 August 2022. So either face-to-face or a hybrid format by then. Let's now come to our exciting So to kickstart this panel, let me invite Dr. James Gomez, Regional Director of Asia Center, to make some welcome remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Ramcharan. Good morning, selamat pagi. To Dr. Inosentius, Samsul, Head of the Expertise Agency of the Indonesian House of Representatives, and colleagues of the panel, Mr. Madis Sotori, Ms. Kiki, Zakiah, Ms. Dwi Resti Pratiwi. Good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure for Asia Center to cooperate with the expertise agency of the Indonesian House of Representatives. Led by Dr. Samsul, for the last few years, we have had previous engagements, conferences here in Bangkok, when Dr. Samsul himself was in attendance. We were very fortunate, even during the COVID period, to continue the cooperation with the expertise agency by engaging in a policy training online several months ago. And this this time to have the benefit of the expert agency to convene a whole panel and give us into how Indonesia is responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Asia Center's collaboration with the expertise agency is part of its collaboration with a range of networks, parliamentary networks, such as Unite. Unite is a global network that is focused on bringing an end to the pandemic. And how Asia Center cooperates is usually undertaking evidence-based policy research and present it as findings to the parliamentarians. Thereafter, we assist them by developing policy toolbox which they can use either to advocate or look into legislative changes. Apart from Unite, that focuses on bringing to the pandemic, also work from parliaments, research agencies in parliaments, and as well as parliamentarians and political parties to advise them and assist them on evidence-based research related to key policy matters. I'm also pleased to announce that moving forward, Asia Center has accorded the UN consultative status by the ECOSOC. So thereafter, we will also be able to make representations to the various UN mechanisms. Hence, it's my great pleasure not only to cooperate under the guidance of Dr. Samsul, the head of the expert agency of the Indonesian House of Representatives, but also to explore further collaboration. Thank you very much. And we are so happy to be able to co-convene and collaborate with the expert agency. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Dr. Samsul, with the expertise agency to make this part. And let me just say it's a pleasure to see you again.
Well, thank you, dearest colleagues, Dr. Robin. Nice to meet you, and Dr. Jess. Good morning. Nice to meet you too.
I think yes.
Can you hear me?
It's a little loud. Perhaps you can reduce.
agency of the House of Representatives, as well as the Asia Center, in the carrying out our respective tasks and responsibilities. The expertise agencies is like a think tank of the Indonesian budget account. Today, or during 3 days of our international conference, from the expertise agencies, there are it's about 30 participants here in this room. So I think we can get many information, many opinions and experience from the other countries that we use for developing our institution. Mr. James and Robin, let me introduce some of our head of the here in our rooms. The first is Miss Tanti Sumartini. She is the Center for Law Evaluation. The second one is Dr. Lydia Suryani. She is the head of the Center for Legislative Drafting. Played like an observer and passive participant in this international conference. I hope that the expertise agency will continue with the Asia Center, because I know that you are, or the Asia Center, were very experienced as Asia, so we can learn more and get more information from you to improve our service in the House of Representatives. By this conference, we come here to share our experience in handling the pandemic COVID in Indonesia, but actually we get many information, many knowledge from my colleagues from the other countries. So I thank you very much for you all, and I hope that we can join in the other conference. Actually, as I hear that next year, maybe we can meet again, and I hope that we can go to Thailand, and we can meet and discuss more intensive. Thank you very much.
You and all your colleagues, please, yes, let's discuss our collaboration and possible collaboration for next year's conference. So with that, Mari, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much indeed to Dr. Robin Ramcharan, the Executive Director of the Asia Center. Also, thank you very much indeed, respectively, for the remarks and the opening remarks from Dr. James Gomes, Regional Director of the Asia Center, and Dr. Inosentius Samsul, the Head of Expertise Agency of the Indonesian House of Representatives. Distinguished participants who attend this conference physically and virtually, namely the heads of the centers in the expertise agency, the Indonesian House of Representatives, legislative drafters, researchers, legal analysts, budget analysts, expert staff, and many others. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, having mentioned before that today, Friday, 10th of September 2021, we will begin the panel here in Jakarta, Indonesia, from now until about 10:30 a.m. The panel in the 6th International Conference COVID-19 in Asia, Communications, Nationalism, and Technology. Firstly, I would like to sorry, that might be technical thing. Again, going to the presentation from panelists, we will see a short video of the expertise agency's profile at glance and briefly. We saw the video. Okay, there is the expertise agency's profile and activities in a short video. The expertise agency is a parliamentary supporting system to provide support of the tasks and functions of the Indonesian Parliament. namely legislation functions, budgeting functions, oversight functions, as well as diplomacy functions. Now we will move on to the core program. That is the presentation by there will be a question and answer session after all presentations. Please feel free to address any questions through the chat box or the raise hand functions. Now I would like to introduce the first speaker, the first panelist. He is Dr. Inosentius Samsul. Currently, he is a head of expertise agency of the Indonesian House of Representatives. He is also prominent law scholars in Indonesia. He is also in the field of law in some universities, including in the Faculty of Law, the University of Indonesia. He will elaborate the legal perspective in handling the COVID-19 pandemic that nowadays occurs across countries and continents, including Indonesia. Now, I would like kindly to invite Dr. Inosentius Samsul to deliver his presentations for 15 minutes. Now, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mardi Sontori. Let me start my presentation with the statement that no country is free from COVID-19. And all of the countries said that the 19 pandemic COVID is an extraordinary disaster. All or each of countries make some efforts to prevent and stop the spread of the virus. The maximum effort to protect all people from various multi-dimensional impacts. The question is there any legal action, legal instruments that each of the countries should be taken? To me, as legal scholars, aware that for all of the legal states, the law is very, very important. The law is a standard for each people, for each the government officials to take action for all our activities, include for handling the 19 pandemic COVIDs. Law guarantees everything is equal treatment, non-discrimination, and fairness. So, to Indonesian government, the first thing when facing the 19 COVID pandemic is thinking the legal instrument in handling the 19 COVID pandemics. This presentation, I will tell you, I will show you the kinds that taken by the Indonesian government. I divided regulations towards the pandemic itself, regulations in the area of health policy, regulation related to how to stop the transmission of virus. The second area is regulation to handle the economic and social impacts of the 19 virus pandemics. So in this time, I will explain how the two kinds of legal instruments working or running in Indonesia. See, my title of the paper is emergency. Maybe you ask, what is the emergency regulation? It is government create or develop the government regulation in lieu and become the law number 2, 2020. And now let us start with the first area of the legal instrument concerning the pandemic handling related to the health sectors. I see, or I found that there are 6 strategies, 6 legal policy that taken by the Indonesian government in handling the health sectors of virus 19 pandemic. The first, and I think this is the main strategy or the main policy, is the government Indonesia stated or declared that the virus 19 pandemic is a disaster. This is non-natural disaster. The second one is the government of Indonesia stated that we have to use in handling the virus 19 COVID the law on health quarantine. And the third is the law on contagious outbreak issues under the law number 4, 1944. So this is the main policy of Indonesia, declared that virus 19 is a non-natural disaster. So the question is, what the consequences if we state that this is a disaster? If the virus 19 pandemic as a disaster, we have to handle it in a very specific and extraordinary legal instruments. I want to tell you what very interesting. I see that one issues that full of debate in handling the COVID-19 in Indonesia is that Indonesia has never used the term of lockdown. Yeah. This is based on the quarantine law. Indonesia didn't use the term on the system of lockdown. The lockdown is not used with the consideration that the lockdown caused people's the people's economic activities stop completely. the consequences is the government should bear people's daily need. And the next problem is the Indonesian economic will go worsen, and the other hand, the state budget will be heavier because the state budget should prepare or to serve or bear the people's daily needs. That is why, and with the full of debate, the Indonesian system or system of handling the virus 19 didn't or don't use the lockdown strategy because it's a very, very bad for the people economics. The second area of agenda in Indonesia, the strategy for prevention policy. We, Indonesian government, implementing the large-scale social restriction. In Indonesia, we call it the PSBB. And now we change the PSBB with the restriction on the movement of people or community activity. What we call the government of Indonesia has implemented policy to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Large-scale restriction or PSB was formed in order to break the chain of spreading the coronavirus, and social restrictions are meant to limit the movement of people and goods to the province, district, or city. But to me, there are many controversial and debating issues. Similar to the COVID pandemic virus itself, that initially perceived as a disgrace to someone exposed to the coronavirus, the policies taken to overcome it, were also considered as something unpleasant, even having political conflict interest between local and national authorities. So I think the last session this afternoon talking about the politics, and this is very heavy of conflict of interest between the central government, province, and the districts. The third area is formation of the task force for acceleration of handling COVID-19. You know that, as I mentioned, that the virus 19 pandemic is a non-disaster, a non-natural disaster, and this is an extraordinary disaster. So the government has established the task force that disaster management agency. The fourth agenda is construction of observation Indonesia built the observation and shelter facilities far from Jakarta, and we built in a island, Galang Island in Batam. But the reason because the virus and the people they isolate from the communities. But you see that observation and isolation, we just stay in house or in a special building, not in area remote area. close related to the second agenda to handling the impact of pandemic virus. And the last first agenda is vaccination policy. One interesting issue is that the vaccination policy is faced with two controversial issues. The first issue is that the vaccination is not aligned with the human rights, because vaccination is individual or personal choice. So there is no mandatory program. And the second issue is vaccination is not in line or not allowed by the religious values. Vaccine is haram or not halal. Yeah, it's very high tension of debate in Indonesia. The second area that I think it's emergency legal instrument that Indonesia established the law number 2/2000 of 20 concerning state finance policy and finance system. My time is only 1 minute.
1 minute left.
Nah, there are, I just mentioned the critical issues there. The first issue is expanding the government authority, but in the other side, overriding the control rights and authority of the Indonesian Parliament. So this is quite controversial. The second one is overriding authority of the Indonesian Parliament, no approval for reallocation and refocusing the budget. And the third issue is addition of the authority of several institutions in handling the economic crisis. For example, for the authority for the Bank of Indonesia, Deposit Insurance Corporation of the Republic of Indonesia, Financial Service Authority, and Financial System Stability Committee, as we mentioned, and KSSSK. Moreover, I think it is a very, from the legal perspective, moreover, this emergency law number 2/2020, the legal principle of lex specialis derogat legi generalis, which means that special legal profession override general law professions, and these provisions also applies the legal principle of law posteriori derogat legi priori, which means that the new law legal norms override the old legal norms. One norms that override by those two principle is exemption from the corruption crimes. Then I think this is a big legal issues. So at the end of my presentation, my suggestion is Indonesia should turn back after we enter to the normal time, turn back the rights of the Indonesian House of Representatives to control, to give approval to the government action in reallocation and refocusing the budget. And the second issue is turn back that if there is an action to that harming the state financial, should be a criminal, should be corruption criminal, and should be come with the sanction of criminal corruption law. Thank you. I think this is, and we can continue with the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for your interesting presentations, Dr. Inosentius Samsul. It is also intellectually stimulating regarding how to handle the pandemic COVID in Indonesia with providing some legal instruments. Okay, now we on to the next speaker. The next speaker is Ms. Resti Pratiwi. She is a budget analyst from the Center for State Budget Studies, and this center actually provides support for the Indonesian Parliament in the function of the budgeting issues. And Ms. Resti will discuss about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on economy, acceleration in Indonesia, fiscal policy response and challenge. For the next 15 minutes, the time is yours, Ms. Resti.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning, panelists, and good morning, all audience. Today, I'm going to present my paper entitled "The Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on Economy and Digital Acceleration in Indonesia." So my paper will focusing on how the government responds this impact through the fiscal policy and what is the challenge. So these are my outline, and I will begin my presentation, explain the background. So as we know that the pandemic really impact to our lives, it's not only impact to the health system, but also it affects to the economy. So last year, many countries experienced an economic recession, and the global economy shrank by 3.6% in 2020. Indonesia also experienced a contraction at 2.07% in 2020. So in responding this pandemic, the government then enacted the law number 2 of 2020 concerning state financial policy and financial system in handling the pandemic. And the law also mandated the government to implement a national economic recovery program, or we call it PEN program. So the PEN program is focusing on recover our economy in both demand and supply side, and it's focusing on 5 sectors. There are a health measure, social protection, business incentive, SME support, and also regional government support. And from this program, the government also spent for almost 40 billion US dollars, or it equals to 40% to our state budget, or 3.5% to our GDP. And since the pandemic has not over yet, and the government then increased the budget by 20% in 2021. So it makes that the budget deficit went up to 6.13% in 2020. Meanwhile, in the normal situation, it should be below than 3%. But the law also mandated that the government have to bring the deficit back to below 3%. And therefore, the government needs to expand their fiscal space by optimizing the tax revenue. So one of the measures is that by taxing the digital economy. So why the digital economy? Because it is one of the sectors that really resilient during the pandemic, and it has reached an impressive value transaction during the pandemic. So my paper, my research question is, what fiscal policy has government taken in responding the digital economy potential, and what are the challenges in taxing digital economy? So first, I will briefly expand how the pandemic impact to our economy. So actually, the pandemic really changing our consumption behavior. So the graph shows that the consumption expenditure, especially for the food and beverages, the transportation, hotel and restaurant was declining dramatically. And since the consumption, the household consumption contributed for almost 56% to our GDP. So the declining consumption will be impact to our economic growth. So last year, we experienced the contraction at 2.07%. And on the other side, the pandemic also accelerated the digitalization, the enforcement of the social distancing, also the lockdown policies. It lets the customers of Indonesian consumers increasing their online shopping to fulfill their needs. And the graph also shows during the pandemic, especially in the lockdown period, the online search on food and beverages was increasing dramatically. It shows that the internet already become our basic needs. And the internet not only open our access for shopping, but also it provide access to the healthcare, education, working, and entertainment. And also because of this, the internet users increasing dramatically. So currently there are more than 196 million in Indonesia already access to the internet. And it also makes that Indonesia become the fourth largest internet users countries in the world. And it also making the digital economy also increasing. So the value of transaction was expected to reach 44 billion US dollar, or it growing by 11% compared to 2019. And that also many of us, many Indonesian customers purchasing so many digital services such as streaming movie, listening music from Spotify, using Zoom, and etc. From which is this company coming, and then these companies, these overseas companies, generate so much profit for our customers, from Indonesian customers. So if the government do not imposing tax on digital, we will getting two major problems. The first one, we will lose our potential revenue. And the second one, it will create an uneven playing field between the domestic taxpayers and offshore suppliers. So basically, the taxation of digital economy already become the main agenda of many countries. But however, our current international corporate tax conference, with its traditional permanent establishment, doesn't capture the new digital business model properly. So the convention stated that the foreign company or non-resident company is subject to tax on their profit business if only they have a permanent establishment. In this case, they must have a physical presence such as office, factory, warehouse, and etc. Meanwhile, for the digital economy, without having physical establishment, this company can selling their digital services and products to many countries, and then they can generate the profit from the electronic transaction, and then they shift this profit from the destination countries to the countries they are coming from. So of course, it will be considered unfair for the destination countries or the market countries, and it legitimate as a best erosion and profit shift, or we call it BEP's practice. And actually, these problems already became the main concern of OECD along with more than 130 countries. So they are trying to address the tax challenge of the digital economy under the BEPS initiative actions. And negotiation actually already started since 2013. However, the agreement, the multilateral agreement, has not reached now. And actually, since the pandemic began, the negotiation is getting more intense. And more than in July 2021, 130 countries joined the statement establishing a new framework for international tax reform. So there will be some finalization of agreement will be expected in October 2021. Well, actually, this is already have been delayed for so many times. And so while waiting for the final agreement, some countries already taking unilateral action by imposing tax on the digital business. So they introduce a new tax, which is digital service tax, for example, France, UK, Italy, and many more. And the tariff also vary from 1% to 7.5%. So what the government have done, so the government of Indonesia responding the digital acceleration in order to create a level playing field between the domestic taxpayers and the foreign suppliers by enacted the law number 2, 2020. Well, this law actually concerning on in handling the pandemic, but this law also includes a provision on taxing of the digital company, digital business. So the first is the corporate income tax obligation. So the government introduced the significant economic for the foreign companies or multinational technology companies already meet this SEP criteria, they will be deemed to have a permanent establishment. So by this, the government then imposing the corporate income tax to these companies. The SEP criteria, for example, they must having amount of sellers in Indonesia, amount of the digital users in Indonesia, but the SEP criteria itself will be further regulated in Minister of Finance decree. However, this policy might be having agreement on double tax avoidance or tax treaties with 67 countries. Meanwhile, the tax treaties doesn't acknowledge the SEP concept. They only acknowledge the physical establishment. So then, in order to avoid the treaty clash with the treaty partners, and then the government decided to postpone this policy. And in anticipating the clash, the treaties problem, actually the government also introduced the electronic transaction tax, which is quite different income tax. So the ETT is attempt to taxing on the sellers of the digital services rather than taxing the profit. So again, since the global consensus has not met yet, it might causing a multiple payment and double taxation for these companies, and it might have the conflict between the taxpayers and the tax authorities. And it also threatens our export as well. So that in order to avoid the conflict, the government then postponed this policy as well. And the government then focusing on implementing value-added tax on intangible foreign goods and services. So it is a consumption tax. The Indonesian consumer will be imposed VAT on the digital services or products that they purchase from the foreign traders, foreign sellers, or foreign e-commerce. And to be a VAT collectors, they must meet some threshold. For example, having a transaction value with Indonesian customer more than $40,000 per year, and then there are 12,000 users that visit their e-commerce from Indonesia in a year. But again, since it's a new policy, the government, especially the digital, the Directorate General Tax or DGT, having a difficulties to attract overseas business to be appointed as a VAT collectors due to lack of data and information of the digital transaction. And another issue is that there is a lack of law enforcement on non-compliant VAT collectors. So actually, the law number 2/2020 also mandated that there are two kinds of sanctions. The first one is administrative sanction, and the second one is the disconnected access to Indonesia market for the non-compliers. But for the first administrative sanction, it referred to law on taxation procedures or KUP, which is it's an audit law, and it still maintains the traditional dispute mechanism, which is its penalties or sanctions do not meet. It's really hardly to apply in the digital business. And the third issue is the determination of consumer criteria for digital product is easy to ignore. The determination is proving by the IP address from Indonesia or the telephone numbers. But by using the VPN, actually the Indonesian customer can using another country's domain, so they can avoid from the tax. And my recommendation is that the longer government postpone this policy, the more that potential review we actually we have a big market of the digital, the big size of the digital market ensures that multinational company business pay their fair share of tax everywhere. And also, the government needs to revise the law on general provision and taxation procedures, or still maintain an old conventional tax dispute settlement mechanism. Well, actually, this law is still ongoing revision between the legislative and also the government. And also, the DGT must enforce data exchange from financial institutions, such as with bank and the credit card transactions. And the fourth is the government needs to take serious action for Indonesia customer who use VPN to avoid the tax. This is what the New Zealand government already done, is that they imposing a fine for almost $25,000 New Zealand residents that's using VPN to avoid the tax. And the last one is that the government needs to improve the tax as well as tech authorities, human resources capability, and the important thing is improve the use of information technology to with the business development. Okay, and that's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you.
Okay, it's perfect time. And thank you very much indeed for your presentation, Mr. Regarding fiscal policy response and challenge. This is due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on economy and digital acceleration. Pandemic that has been going and critical issue for almost 2 years. From the presentation, Resti review COVID-19 in Indonesia. Let's move on to the next speaker, the last one, the third speaker, and I would like to introduce herself. She is Miss Kiki. She is a budget analyst from the Center for Public Financial Accountability Studies. She is senior staff in this center. She has been working there 19 years ago, same as and Ms. Kiki will deliver the topic about the impact of COVID-19 on micro, small, medium enterprises, MSMEs, policy and response for accountability. And Ms. Kiki, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mardi. Good morning, everyone. In this opportunity, I would like to present my paper entitled is the impact of COVID-19 on micro, small, medium enterprises, MSMEs, policy and response accountability. Before I start to explain my paper, I want to give some outlines. They are the first one is the background of the important reason of MSMEs in accountability, especially on COVID-19 pandemic. Next, the problems accountability in three stimulus policies of MSMEs in the case capital assistance, and the last one is the recommendation for the problems of MSMEs in COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. MSMEs is a standalone productive business unit which is carried out by individual business entities in all economic sector. Micro, small, and growth of MSMEs is 60% of GDP, consisting of 37.77% micro scale enterprises and 13.70% for medium scale enterprises. This graphic represents that before the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of MSMEs increase. The competitiveness of Indonesian MSMEs relative low, especially in the managerial aspect of the business. This emergence of the COVID pandemic has created a shock of or pressure of the supply and demand set of MSMEs, which has led to the decline in MSMEs productivity and income. The emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic has had negative MSMEs, which is previously known to be resilient in the face of economic turmoil. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic, many MSMEs have gone out of business. They cannot survive and continue their business and even worse. Also, many MSMEs cannot pay their debt or loan. In response to the condition, Law Number 2, 2020 established a National Economy Recovery PEN program. Policy. One of them was intended for MSMEs by allocating a budget of EDR 123.75 trillion in 2020 and has been revised to EDR 116.31 trillion with a realized value of EDR 110.75 trillion, about 95.22%. As for 2021, the budget allocation to support MSMEs and corporate financing is ADR 146.6 trillion. There's in addition to allocating the budget for MSMEs, the government also makes MSMEs policies in the case capital assistance. They are the first productive special presidential aid micro business productive assistance or BPUM. The second one, additional regional incentive fund or DAD for fiscal year 2020, and the last one is stimulus for working capital assistance result of refocusing local government budget or APBD. There are problems in the implementation of national economic recovery for the MSMEs, which include inaccuracies in the distribution, incompatibility of data, and incompatibility of the use of the PEN assistance. Therefore, the large of MSMEs budget allocation must be realized with high accountability. Next slide, I want to explain about accountability productive specialist at micro business productive assistance or BPUM. The special presidential at micro business productive assistance or BPUM is one of the MSMEs stimulus that provide cash assistance to the business people and aim to respond to the capital difficulties of micro business people as a stimulus for the available of working capital cash flow, so they can continue to run there in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. The budget allocation in 2020 is ADR 28 trillion and has been realized 100%, and in 2021 the budget allocation for BPUM is ADR 15 36 trillion. Based on the result of the study, it's known that there are still several accountability problems in the implementation of MSMEs in the BPUM stimulus policy, including first, the problems related to the data of prospective BPUM recipient that do not meet to the criteria and requirements as stipulated in the Ministry and Small Medium Enterprises number 6 of 2020 concerning BPUM. Second one is the incomplete recipient data and delays in distribution due to verification, duplication of substances beneficiaries who are not registered in the beneficiary degree and recipient whose business location are difficult or not found. The third is the condition of monitoring and evaluation is already less than optimal for the implementation of BPUM. First, lack of supervision on the accuracy of distribution and utilization of BPUM by its destination. The last one is one of the purposes of monitoring and evaluation is transparency in the implementation and distribution has not been unfulfilled yet because the access is difficult to identify the recipient of BPUM. Next slide is accountability of additional regional incentive fund or DED for MSMEs. The regional incentive fund is allocated to provide incentive of award to region for the performance of local government in improving and achieving performance in the area or regional financial governments, public services, basic public services, and community welfare. Ministry of Finance allocated IDR 13.5 for the fiscal year 2020, and the emergence of the COVID pandemic Ministry of Finance to set an additional DAD allocation for 2020 fiscal year of 100 PDR 5 trillion. One of MSMEs and traditional markets. The AD allocation for fiscal years 2021 is IDR 13.5 trillion with no additional DAD, which will entirely be used to support economic and health recovery due to the impact of COVID-19. Additional DAD, which is not be used for the recovery of MSMEs, is one of the various MSMEs management accountability problems, such as the use of additional DAD for food security affairs matters and focus on infrastructure development through the incentive working program and so on. Refocusing APBD for working capital assistance. One of the MSMEs stimulus policies is the working capital assistance from the regional focusing. The stimulus of working capital assistance from the refocusing of regional revenue and budget or FCB is financial assistance given to MSMEs. There are several problem based on some research such as not all regions have sufficient PBD for working capital assistance stimulus to MSMEs. Several regions such as Cianjur Regency, which have a focus the APBD for MSMEs working capital, but have not distributed it yet evenly, and Cirebon City providing stimulus for working capital assistance based on this principle of equity and not based on specific criteria. After almost 2 years since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic that has not ended until now, neither the PAN policy, particularly for MSMEs, has been intended beyond 2021. So all it takes improve steps to overcome various problems of accountability for MSMEs by stakeholders. Refers improving the accuracy of the target distribution of the MSMEs recovery budget through the synergy of monitoring, evaluation, and supervision between the regional government and the central government, as well as the internal supervisory apparatus. And improvement of the MSMEs database that accommodates by name by address through the establish of one data or one single platform, as well as data improvement by carrying out verification and validation and data exchange by minister, three agencies, local government on a regular and continuous basis. The second one, mentoring and the effectiveness of the MSMEs budget for more productive survey that can reach a large number of respondents. The third one is optimizing the role and support of the government as a guarantee the primary market in absorbing MSMEs product. Fourth, it is necessary to issue regulation containing the obligation of each local government to allocate DAD in the sense of economic recovery, particularly in the MSMEs sector. And the last one is to issue laws and regulation regarding the allocation of DAD for the following years. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed again to Ms. Kiki, having presented that in her presentation, and whether the MSMEs budget allocation has been accurate and implemented by the applicable laws and regulations. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say hello again for the audience attending physically here in the room in and also audience attending the international conference virtually. We move on to another 25 to 30 minutes for question and answer sessions. Please feel free to address any question for registered participants through the chat box or use the raise hand function. The participant would like to ask Nukila Evanti. The rules is please briefly introduce your name and then from and for what institution do you work for. Okay, thank you. And Pak Sensi, please.
Thank you very much. As far I state that vaccination programs is for all people and it's free and it is mandatory. By this statement, in principle, the House of Representatives, actually, in principle, support, policy in the implementation on vaccination program, and the second one is support the initiative of the people what the Royong vaccination. Vaccination means that this is support and give more participation from the public, from the civil society, even from the state-owned enterprise, women, from NGOs, religious groups, organizations, and even support or participation by the academic institution for university, high schools. They support and they do the vaccination programs. And there is some NGOs or societies that support and participate in this program. And the second one, I think only one, then maybe.
Okay, Nukila, I'm trying to answer your question regarding why the urgency of the revision of the law or taxation procedures. So basically, broadly speaking, that the government revised this KUPs in order to to reform our fiscal. Why to reform our fiscal? Because it have to be suited with this current economic situation. So the government have to revise the law so that this revenue, our tax, can stimulate our economy, because it's already outdated law, which is the last version is 2009. So for regarding this case, which is why this law should be revised for the in the digital business. The taxpayers, the digital taxpayers, or the VAT collectors, these are the settlement mechanism still maintain the old traditional one. So actually, the law stated that for the non-compliance, when they delay to pay the tax, there are some a fine. And if the taxpayers do not allowing this regulation, and then the dispute settlement will be in the tax court. So if this digital business doesn't have a physical establishment, so it hardly to be applied in Indonesia. Actually, it's so basically it's outdated law, so have to adjust with the current condition, current economic condition, as well as the digital business model. So in this case, the resufficient is needed to increase the compliance of the taxpayers. Okay, am I answer your question? I think that's all.
Okay, thank you very much for your response, Resti and Dr. Inosentius Samsul. And like welcome, Dr. Robin will ask a question from the Asia Center. So, Dr. Robin.
Thank you very much, Ravi. I have maybe 3 quick questions for presenters. And the first one goes to Dr. Inosentius. Dr. Inosentius, I wonder, I assume in asking this question that the expertise agency has the ability, the capacity to issue independently consultation papers for the members of Parliament and for the wider public. So in such a consultation paper, I wonder what you would say, what advice you would give regarding 2 things. In all of the legislation that you have pointed to, and in handling such a pandemic, you know, a white paper, for example, on guidelines to handle a pandemic situation, what would you say are the provisions about the limitations of rights across the 3 or 4 legislations that you have included, talked about? And more specifically, I wonder what those legislations about the role of the military in responding to such a non-traditional crisis. So that's to Dr. Samsul. The second question, it's probably more of a comment than a question, is for Ms. Resti. I wonder, you know, it's very interesting, the current developments in relation to tax policy and of multinational, in relation to multinational corporations. So I wonder if you've had a chance to look at, for example, the business and human rights framework. Because what you are talking about, the responsibility of transnational corporations in relation to the societies in which they are operating. And so, Pillar 2 of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights provides an interesting framework to consider the fiscal tax responsibilities of these corporations to the whole society. So I wonder if you have a chance to think about that aspect. And lastly, to Ms. Kiki, thank you for presenting the various funds and initiatives regarding the MSMEs. Typically, what you are presenting and talking about is social protections, jobs, employment, and so on. I wonder if you have had a chance to analyze not only the details of the various initiatives you have outlined, but is there a sense, as of now, of the impact of whether these initiatives and funds are properly responding at the national or regional or municipal level? So I will leave those 3 questions for the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, Dr. Robin. There are 3 questions to Dr. Inosentius Samsul, and also there is one to Resti, and Kiki, respectively. So the floor is yours, Dr. Inosentius Samsul, to respond or answer the questions to Dr. Robin.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. First is related to the non-military role of the Indonesian military in handling the pandemic or virus 19 pandemic. Basically, as I mentioned that when the Indonesian government stated or declared that the virus 19 pandemic is a disaster, as a disaster, it means that open and force the all national resources to involve in this program or activities. I mentioned that there are three main law or regulations. Regulation on health quarantine, regulation on outbreaks, and the third one is or law number 24/2007 on disaster. Based on the law number 24/2007 on disaster, there is a space, there is a functions or a task for the military to involve in the disaster management. So when the government COVID is a disaster, it means that give the chance or give the authority to the military involving to handle the virus 19 pandemic. In fact, or in the implementation, you know that the head of the national disaster agency, it lead or the chief active military. This is achieved by the active military. I think by his position, the active military, and if I don't, I think it is a very high rank of active military. He can coordinate all of the national resources, involve the include the military institution. What are they do now, or the role of military institution? They very active. They very active in the vaccination program. Very active in handling the you know that we have one of what we call it pandemic hospital, and the biggest pandemic hospital, maybe Dr. Robin has heard before, Wisma Atlet is actually, it is Army hospital. Army hospital. It is the director is a doctor, but actually he's an army. And the other point, I think the military is very active in. This is very sensitive and interesting issues in Indonesia. You know, Dr. Robin, maybe you know what we call the Nusantara vaccine. You know that Nusantara vaccine is a research or vaccine that promoted by the Army Hospital. This is a very national vaccine, but it is vaccine because it is still need the next the efficacy of this vaccine. But you know that the issue of Nusantara vaccine because the national or Nusantara vaccine is origin by the Indonesian people, and it is originate in the army hospital. So you can understand what I mean. The second issue is about the human rights. The human rights, as I mentioned before, that many groups of activists, but I see that more of them is individual movement, individual express. That the right of health is very personal, so is not allow the vaccination program as a mandatory to all of the people. To all of the people. So some of the people refuse or not. Don't want to get a vaccine because they think that this is my right. So the government should limit it, his authority to give vaccination to the people. I think this is the two issues that very controversial. But for the participation of military, I see that it is a very firm, legal as a non-military action. And in fact, the military institution, I think it's very helpful for us. Very much, Dr. Robin.
Dr. Inosentius, before we, Mr. Moli, forgive me for intervening, before we proceed to the other panelists, I think Dr. James just wanted to mention something briefly to you.
Yeah, Dr. Inosentius, when you discuss the role of the military, I want to, invite you and your colleagues perhaps to look at this report, the securitization of COVID-19 protocol. We have published it with harm reduction international. It was just released. It was also highlighted yesterday afternoon. Included in this study is some key policy recommendations that may be helpful. We also presented the findings to the global network of parliamentarians called LAIN, who are looking at how to deal with ending pandemic. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I also wanted to share an update to you and all the friends who are sitting in the room from BKD that developments in Thailand are also kind of similar in the sense that Thailand is also trying to move away from the current use of emergency to articulate public health law, under which the different component parts will be present to deal with future emergencies. And I think there is also a shift towards the development of national vaccines. And in Thailand, this is led by Chulalongkorn University. So, but underlining all that is really the business behind the vaccine and who will sell the vaccine nationally and who will get the returns from the vaccine. So I'll just highlight that and also flag that the next two panels, one is about media and reporting of vaccines, following it after this, then the politicians from the region will discuss after lunch the politics of vaccines, and the former Prime Minister of Thailand will also so I just wanted to give some feedback. Over to you, Rob.
Sure, thank you, James. And sorry, back to Mr. Mahdi for the remaining two questions. Thank you.
Okay, before response from Resti and Kiki, Pak Sensi will add more, just little bit, Pak Sensi.
Thank you, Dr. James, for the information that the book, policy paper from the Asia Center. But just to tell you that we just have an assignment from the members of the House to prepare the quarantine law that most of the perspective from the national security. So I hope that we can discuss more for this, because we have a benchmark from the other countries. We want to develop the new quarantine system, that the main issues is the national security system. We just got this assignment 2 weeks ago, and then I just form a group of researchers, legal drafters, to try to draft a policy paper, and maybe it will be come with the like academic paper or draft bill of Indonesian new quarantine laws. And I hope that we can get your literature, your reference to improve our report. Thank you very much, and of course we will revise the quarantine law to include, to accommodate some international standards. Some international standard, for example, law number 5, 1994, concerning the ratification of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. Law number 7, 1994, concerning ratification of the agreement establishing the World Trade Organization, and law number 21 of 2004, concerning the ratification of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety to the Convention on Biological Diversity. So thank you very much. And I hope that we can discuss more deep on these issues next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Inosentius Samsul, and the turn for Resti. But I think there is also the question from the floor. I think you might answer for this as well. The question is, how much funding the state should devote education during the pandemic, and what infrastructure should be in place to support it? What are your recommendations in terms of education, increasing state funding through taxation and social capital? These questions come from Rianto, the expert staff from Commission 1, the Indonesian Parliament.
The first give a comment for the question of the Mr. Robin. So actually, it's more like giving me the suggestion of to improve my my paper. So actually, the relation to the society business to consider the tax responsibilities. That in this case that we have problems in to increase the compliance of the taxpayers in order to pay the tax, because our tax system is a self-assessment. So it's quite difficult to increase their tax responsibility. However, the government have to increase the law enforcement to increase the tax responsibility for the business sectors. And besides that, our tax gap is quite big comparing to other countries. I think it's recorded that based on the Minister of Finance report that our tax gap is almost 8 point something%, but it's actually normally in OECD standard it should be 3% something. So for the question from the Rianto is asking about the education fund, yeah. So actually in our constitution also mentioned that education have own allocation budget. So our budget, so the education allocation was 20% to our budget. So actually the education itself are the main agenda of our government. So for the during the pandemic, there are many programs from the government to increase the education, especially because of the lockdown policy. So the students have to do a study in their house. So one of the measures is by giving a subsidy of internet data package, for example. So for the infrastructures, yes, we are still ongoing to improve the infrastructure for the education, and because it's already main agenda of government. And also regarding the fiscal policy 2022, the education development already become of our main reform. So in this case, yeah, education already became a main priority for the government. Okay, I think, yeah, that's all.
Okay, here we have just 1 minute left.
Sorry. However, our study is not covering the impact of those various incentives toward Indonesia GDP. But currently in the second quarter, our GDP increased by 7.7%. We can assume the policy worked. But still we haven't really examined exactly how big is the impact of those incentives for MSMEs toward the Indonesia economic or GDP. Okay, and that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Titi, for your response to the Robin's question. And the last one to Dr. Samsul, just a quick response. Do you see a way out of emergency legislation to a more normal law in dealing with the future health crisis? This comes from Asia Center as well.
Okay, I think this is a quite difficult questions because you know that the legal institution itself is not separate from the good governance, accountability. So I think that is for the future. The key issues is how to establish the normal law, but support by the strong but good governance. I think the support issues is good governance. If we see in the emergency norms, for example, talking about the corruption, talking about the the right or the right of the House. If we can handle the corruption, it should not took it in emergency. It is a normal, no corruption. Or when the position of check and balances between the executive and the House, it's running well. I think no, this the control approval of the House, it's good, but in practice of or approval of the House, it's more political, more political intrigue like that. So I think the key issues for the good legislation or for the normal legislation is based on a good governance, accountable governance. So we can implement the new law that it is running for every situation, every weather, even in disaster or even in the pandemic situation. I think this is a very narrow opinion, but it is we have to make a long reflection how to make the law running well. The people feel or get the result of the implementation of the law.
Okay.
That's my, maybe it's a very philosophical answer, Dr. Robin. So very sorry for that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for a response from Resti, Kiki, and Dr. Inosentius. Samsul. We are near to the end of this panel today. Has been presented and responded by the speaker or panelists from our panel in Jakarta, Indonesia, regarding legal instrument perspective, fiscal policy perspective, accountability perspective. Those insights the COVID-19 pandemic. Will be beneficial for our country, particularly to the expertise agency of the Indonesian House of Representatives, as well as the Asia Center, and also for all participants and all partners. And finally, I'm looking forward to seeing you next year in the 7th International Conference. Hopefully, it will be conducted offline or meet in person in Bangkok, Thailand. Hopefully. I would say thank you very much for kind attention, collaboration, and participation. Again, thank you very much indeed, and big applause for all of us. And then, therefore, I return it to the Asia Center, Dr. Robin or Dr. James. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Modi, and we look forward to being in touch and hopefully to seeing you in Bangkok next year. Time is running, so let's move straight on to the next panel on media freedoms and access to vaccine information. The panel hosted by Internews. Without further ado, we turn the floor over to Rowan Green, Asian Projects Director at Internews. Rowan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Robin, and welcome everyone to this session. We're going to be looking at media access and the vaccines. As we COVID-19, but many people within the community are still quite skeptical and hesitant when it comes to the use of these vaccines, and much of that has been driven by conflicting information. So today we want to discuss the role of media in providing good information, building trust
and also look at where censorship has played a role in coverage of the COVID vaccines. First, I'd like to quickly. We've got Sunny Imbaraj Krishnan, who's the Regional Health Advisor on Crook, who's the Senior Writer at Kaosod in Thailand. Then we have Agus, who's the Head of External Communications and COVID-19 Focal Point at Dewan Pers, the Press Council of Indonesia. And last but not least, Dilshad Nadi, the Executive